The doors are open to a new Deadlock meta, as Valve have just shipped a gigantic balance patch. Of course, in classic Yoshi fashion, it was listed as a small update, but it's anything but, including a rework to soul orbs, adding medkits to the game, redefining the laning phase, and so much more. Everything is jam-packed inside of this update. We've had multiple heroes receiving a balance pass, including nerfs, buffs, and adjustments alike, alongside, of course, complete overhauls to core gameplay mechanics, including the base camera being adjusted. As you can see, the field of view is now far wider for all heroes in the game, giving you way more versatility when it comes to spotting enemies from afar. Alongside that, bridge buffs and buffs in general have been adjusted, giving them that fine-tune of balance that you'd love to see in a game like Deadlock. So why not secure yourself the rejuvenator, hit the subscribe button, and get yourself sat down and ready for today's episode of Patch Notice. As always, I'm your host, Jackie, and thanks for watching Patch Notice here live on Dead Air. This one took a couple of days as I wanted to really get to grips with the patch and formulate my opinions on it, rather than rushing out a video and not having the time to truly understand all the intricacies of these changes, as there was so much that went into this update. With that out of the way then, let's start at the beginning. As I mentioned in the intro, trooper bounty mechanics and soul orbs have had a bit of a fine-tuning. Valve have gone ahead and switched up the system. You can see on screen that soul orbs now have a secondary orb. Of course, you'll still be able to confirm and deny soul orbs as regular with the system that we've come to understand and love in Deadlock's laning phase, but this secondary orb will now deploy onto the ground and need to be picked up to grant you and anyone else inside of your lane the soul bounty tied to it, meaning of course you're not just going to get the passive soul income from just being nearby the troopers as they die, something we've had in the game since around late February time, whenever the free lane update came into the game. So it's interesting to see how things have changed here. In terms of how this feels in game and what it encourages, you're going to want to fight for control of lanes a lot more. Because if you're not being aggressive, if you're freezing lanes, if you're stalemating in these fights, you're not going to be getting the full potential and full value of these troopers' souls anymore. Of course, the system inherently is very different. It's going to be more reminiscent of a game like Minecraft or potentially Heroes of the Storm, where you physically have to pick up these XP orbs from the ground. But honestly, it works pretty well in practice. I think it might actually solve an awful lot of issues with laning phases being dragged out and really just being stomped on one side or the other. Curious to see if, as things go on, it will lead the game into a bit more of a snowbally fashion if you really do dominate in lane, but for the most part, my games have all been really nice following this adjustment. Med packs are another cool addition as well, offering a new revitalized way of giving out heals, rather than of course the random pulsation that would come out from the banner troop in lane. All in all, it's a great change in my eyes, but I'm curious what the wider community thinks, so let me know down below now we've had a couple days to play around with it. And now, let's dial in on the vast array of hero-related changes. That's right, this was a big one, of course branded as a balance patch. You know that means there is going to be so much to sink our teeth into, so let's crash down and kick it off with Abrams. For Detective Abrams, there's been a couple of changes that are certainly worth talking about. Surprisingly, I didn't actually expect to see a collection of Abrams buffs on the timeline when this one dropped, but I'm sure the Abrams mains will be taking this one in their stride. First two changes here are going to be related to shoulder charge, with that cooldown coming down by quite a few seconds there, from 37 to 33 seconds. Pretty nice base cooldown reduction that's going to allow you to get those shoulder charge stuns off more consistently and at least maybe bait out some more plays with the ability. Going into the tier 3 as well, that's going to be a bit of a change up in terms of how you're rebalancing the distribution of cooldown, though, with that one being scaled back from a minus 22 seconds cooldown to a minus 18 second cooldown. And then finally, of course, that's going to be Seismic Impact, with its tier 3 duration going up by an additional second. So some nice adjustments there if you enjoy a bit of the Blue Detective. Moving on from that, this is a hell of a switch up for bebop. Now, I Don't know if I love or hate what Valve have done here, going in with quite a cheeky change when it comes to Sticky Bombs Tier 3. They've removed the on attach minus 30% outgoing damage for 5 seconds to instead be a on cast plus 5 meters a second for 3 seconds sprint increase, and multiple instances of this stack independently. You can see I'm being able to build up quite a lot of velocity here, spamming them on top of myself. I think this one could sort of encourage very aggressive self-bomb bebop plays, where you're stacking them on yourself to chase someone down and then blow up in their face. Lastly, of course, we also saw Hyper Beam having a couple of tweaks in terms of its damage output, taking that off the initial DPS and then putting it onto its tier 2 to make you have to invest the AP a little bit more to get extra bang for your buck with Hyper Beam. So yeah, definitely going to be some mixed rhetoric on the bebop changes, I imagine. Maybe in the lower ranks, you're going to have some speedy bebops running at you, blowing you to kingdom come. Let me know what you think about that one, Scrap Golem fans. Moving on, let's get on to Billy. Right then, for Billy, it's pretty simple actually. Just 2 quick buffs to focus on for his tier 2 and tier 3 investment into Rising Ram and how Valve are distributing a little bit more damage output for him. 10% flat there going into the tier 2 from 25 to 35%, and then up by 0.5% on, of course, his max health as spirit damage that's going to be given to you from that tier 3. That's the weapon damage you get from the tier 2 as well there. So good benefits in terms of his output of DPS. Should be pretty good for those tanky billies that want to pack a bit more of a wallop rather than just taking a lot of wallops. Let's dial in on Calico though. Now, the changes made to the Catgirl are a bit of a mixed bag of buffs and nerfs here. Of course, initially you've got the clip size going up with 2 additional rounds, but the reload time has also gone up by 0.1 second to try and balance that out, giving you a little bit more firepower to play with potentially, with that one slight drawback of an additional millisecond when it comes to reloading. Alongside that, Gloom Bomb CD has also gone up by 2 seconds, and then Return to Shadows got some focus on it. They'd actually mind the changes that have been made here to Calico overall. I think the adjustments to the Ultimates tier 3 is actually a pretty good way of being able to rebalance it, with that tier 3 damage amp going down from plus 24% to only plus 18%, and of course that duration up by 1 second. Let's take a second though to focus on the doorman. That's next on the docket here with a magnitude of adjustments. Couple simple ones like the initial nerf to his base regen that's going to go down from 2 to 1. Second change is a bit more interesting, with Valve stating that the bullet damage fall off and effectiveness now uses the actual distance travelled rather than the distance between the starting position and end position. You'd imagine this will fix issues like we saw popping up on the subreddit recently, with people slightly abusing the placement of doors to be able to deal full damage onto guardians without being anywhere near the initial radius, tricking the game a little bit there in terms of how it was calculating the distance of shot fired. And then of course they go on to just sort of play around with the cool bell output of damage, with how it's going to be dealing that, increasing its spirit scaling whilst reducing the flat DPS from the explosion itself. Again, I think these are good changes in terms of the optics of Valve figuring out how fully to balance this character and fix all the oddities with the way that it works, of course, with the unique element of Doorman's Doors providing you that odd opportunity to potentially deal damage or make plays that aren't quite intended within the engine. Moving on from that, we can focus up on Drifter, who got 2 buffs inside of the initial release of the patch, with his base HP regen going up by 1 from 2.5 to 3.5, and Rend getting a couple seconds knocked off the cooldown. Valve went on though to make a bit of an adjustment here to Drifter following the release of this, with a minor hotfix where we did see his overall HP going down slightly. Still, it seems like with all the other changes inside of this update, Drifter's been performing very well. So if you're enjoying the homeless lunatic, it's certainly a good time to be playing him. Moving on from that, we can focus up on Professor Dynamo. Now, you might have actually thought maybe there'd be some Dynamo nerfs or some changes thrown in. No, unexpectedly, these are some magnificent buffs for Stomp Dynamo enjoyers. Not only is his base regen going up by 0.5, which is going to be a nice little addition, it's more kinetic pulse that you want to be focusing on. That range has gone up by a flat 5 meters, increasing it from 15 to 20, which is quite a drastic amount, especially when you factor in the conjunction of the buff we've been given there to the cooldown, with quite a few seconds being taken off the top. Now, for context as well, if you're wondering sort of, 20 meters, is that much of a buff, having the extra 5 on top for free? It absolutely is. Contextually, from one guardian to the other, it's about 100 meters or just shy, give or take, from one side of the lane to the other. This means you're covering a very decent chunk without any investment in terms of items or scaling otherwise. So just having that initial base range to play with is a massive boon. This is effectively, half or more of that initial brawling zone you're going to be fighting in terms of the space in lane. So great buff there for Stomp Dynamos. Getting into Holiday, it's a boatload of red. Nerfs all across the board. A lot of adjustments here in terms of scaling down damage output, bounce pads, and fixing some cheeky bugs that have been around for quite some time. So good on Valve there in terms of the optics of sort of patching out some of those issues that I think players have just sort of accepted were a mechanic for Holiday at this point. Sort of getting additional speed and distance with a dash that you can use in terms of bounce pad timing. So fixing some of those core problems alongside removing some of that egregious damage from the bounce pad, taking 20 off the top and scaling down your actual bullet output as well. So Holiday certainly receiving the broad end of the stick there, getting hit with a whole load of nerfs. Of course, there are some minor benefits when you factor in the gun changes we got inside of this update, where you might be able to balance it out somewhat, but potentially less focus on the stomp builds where you're going to be bounce pounding in off the back of spirit scaling. Maybe a little bit more focus again on having to hit some nice headshots. We'll see. Who knows? Everyone's favorite cowgirl will always get play though, I'm sure. Infernus is going to be burning onto our screens next. Now, 2 Infernus changes on this one, both of them being nerfs, and this is going to be in terms of how quickly he's able to get that damage off with not only his afterburn build-up, but also his napalm damage output in terms of the DPS amp that it gets. Keynotes for this one being, if you're an Infernus main, you're going to want to work on that aim. Make sure you're hitting headshots every single time, as body shots, of course, will now be 10% slower on building up your afterburns. When you factor in both of these changes, if you want to be able to deal similar damage to pre-patch, you need to make sure that every shot from his hand cannon is going to be counting. Let's focus up and zoom in on Ivy though. Let's see what Valve have done here, as there's a couple of changes in reality, a bit of a mixed bag. This is one of the larger collection of nodes that we've got throughout this patch. Stoneform is going to be getting a buff, so that's just straight cooldown reduction. Goes down from 42 seconds to 37. Kudzu Bomb has also been tweaked as well, with its damage being reduced by 10, but its spirit scaling being upped by 0.10 to try and balance that out a little bit and give you that overall investment back if you are pumping your numbers into spirit damage over the course of a game. The initial damage for it though going down, so a bit of a swings and roundabouts type situation for her one there. Although preceding that, the buffs are actually quite interesting in terms of what Valve have chosen to give Ivy inside of this balance update. We can have a look at Watcher's Covenant. Bullet lifesteal for that has gone up by an additional 5%, increasing from 10 to 15. I like that. I think that's going to be a nice little base buff there, especially if you're investing more into a gun-based Ivy following this patch, with spirit being slightly reduced overall, and of course the changes to cooldown reduction and overall just nerf of some of the more ability spam that we've been seeing recently that we'll get into in a little bit here in Patch Notice. Lastly though, let's have a look at the one that I think should be top of the docket, and that's going to be the changes made to airdrop. These are really interesting. I think what they've done here is actually pretty cool. Cast range goes up by an additional 2 meters on airdrop, but it's this change. Airdrop's damage penalty for an ally you carry has been reduced from minus 50% to minus 30%. Hopefully this encourages more play again with airdropping from Ivy, where you want to synergize with a teammate that's got a good ultimate before you drop them in to cause some chaos. Feels like that wasn't happening for a while. Shame. Kelvin though is going to be the next Iceman. them that we need to dial in on. And honestly, it makes me happy every time I see Kelvin nerfs on my screen. Maybe I'm biased, but I really do hate getting absolutely snowball schooled by this man in lane. The Ice White charges at you, absolutely ruins you with his frost grenades, and then finishes you off when he captures you in his frozen shelter after beaming you in the face for so damn long with that Arctic beam. Anyway, enough about complaining about Kelvin. Let's have a look at the nerfs that Valve have chosen to make here. Bullet velocity goes down from 254 to 160 on his gun, so huge nerf there. Of course, Frost Grenade also going to have its base damage reduced from 74 to 60, so should reduce some of that initial shock when you get hit by a Frost Grenade and feel like you've lost all of your HP in one go. And additionally, they switch up how you're going to be getting rewarded when investing AP for Frozen Shelter. Tier 2 is changed from minus 45 second cooldown to plus 1 second on duration, with its duration overall going down from 5.5 seconds to 5 seconds. So quite a few adjustments here for Kelvin. And you know, bias aside, I actually think these are great optics in terms of how Valve have approached nerfing Kelvin here, with the focus being more on rewarding skillful play with the ultimate rather than spamming it a little bit more with the increased cooldown reduction, giving you 1 second of extra duration to make it really count when it is a clutch play. And you're going to be clutching onto the edge of your seat if you're a fan of the Lash, as Lash has received a gigantic collection of buffs inside of this update. So let's dive straight into it and see what Valve have done. Initially, grapple cooldown's been reduced from 42 seconds to 35 seconds, allowing you to get more height and more movement, which of course is so core to the overall gameplay loop of Lash that it makes sense why they've done it and should feel very rewarding. In the games I've played, it feels like you've got a lot more mobility in terms of quick decision making, so I love that. It feels like it plays into, of course, sort of, you know, the hero archetype that Lash has as well quite nicely. You want to be able to be mobile, and this is a great way to do it. Flog has also had massive sweeping improvements in terms of its healing, damage output, and cooldown reduction. So some great play there for self-sustain on Lash. You're not going to find yourself high and dry, struggling to get HP back in a dire situation. That should keep you afloat whilst also outputting some nice damage. And finally, Death Slam received a minor, well, potentially, you know, pretty decent buff, depending on how you use the ultimate, as 10 seconds have been shaved off of that cooldown, going down from 155 to 145, so saving you some bang for your buck there. Let's see how things go. We'll know soon enough if everyone's getting slammed out of the server. Less slamming though and more silencing when it comes to the buff here for Lady Geist. It's also mixed rhetoric about this one, with a lot of people assuming that what this meant is that the actual range of Soul Exchange had been brought up to 25 meters. That's not the case. By no means is Soul Exchange even 15 meters. It's around 5 or so, honestly. So you've got a very limited range still. That's still going to remain. All that this has done is given you increased usability with the silencing effect you get at tier 3. You can see the on-screen range there in the previous shot. But moving on from Lady Geist, we go to her biggest fan. It's Mina Ha. Now, Mina's had a couple of changes that I think are completely reasonable in terms of the rebalance Valve have gone for here. The Sanguine Retreat adjustments are actually pretty balanced. I think this fixes a lot of issues in terms of self-sustain and escape being through the roof with this character. Obviously, you're very squishy as Mina, but you just had so much ability to duke and escape that it made it very hard to shut her down because of those resets on air jumps and dash limits off the back of using Sanguine. You won't get that anymore. Love Bites has also had some minor balance adjustments made to it, so love to see that there. And that brings us on to mcginnis, of course, with Valve's approach on this one being a couple of adjustments in terms of the turrets and the spectral wall speed. So mini turrets are actually going to be getting increased health per boon, going up by 3 from 10 to 13. That's going to be a nice little change there, giving them slightly more tankiness and sustain when you're throwing down your turret buddies all over the Cursed Apple streets. And lastly, spectral wall speed going up by 10%. This could be huge for actually making some counterplay maneuvers over longer range distances. For short range, it's very easy to get those clutch walls off to be able to block attacks or save your teammates. distance. If you want to try and stop someone from getting away, though, it's a little bit harder with how much quicker on average most players are, especially if they invest into any move speed items. This is going to let you catch with them a little bit more. I think this actually is a bit of a later change factored in maybe when you think about, moving to free lanes, the native increase in sprint and running speed that we got to all the heroes. Feels like Valve are catching up with the times on that one, so love to see it. Let me know what you think of these adjustments, mcginnis mains, and let's start to set our focus on the oasis that is the collection of adjustments here for Mirage. If you enjoy playing Mirage, you're going to be quite happy with these, I'd imagine. Fire Scarabs have had their max health steal increase from 37 to 45, so a decent chunk there, honestly. That's going to be a nice little change that should help you out when it comes to being able to give yourself more sustenance and survivability, but it's the traveler changes that I'm most interested in. You can now target friendly objectives. You could actually TP across the map, effectively giving you that versatility to have a built-in teleport and protect walkers or even, base guardians themselves, whatever it might be, with, of course, even the increased reduction on cooldown on that as well. So great changes there for a roaming Mirage. For Mo and Krill, it's just the one nerf. You're going to be losing out on that free HP regen going down to 1, so losing 2 off the top there. Quite a big change for the mole man. Will it affect you, though, if you invest everything into green items and pummel everyone to death with your ultimate? Who really knows? Maybe it'll be fine. But we can drop down and turn a new Paige, as there's been quite a lot of nerfs here for Paige, which I imagine most people are going to be pretty excited about, because it was starting to feel like, 3 things were certain in life: death, taxes, and a Paige that would buy split shot gun items and then absolutely ruin you over the course of a game of Deadlock. Valve have gone back in with some smart adjustments here in terms of what they're going to be giving you for those AP investments on defend and fight, and I think this has actually fixed a lot of the issue snowballing from that fire rate increase that she was getting natively, the plus 25%. At most now, that's going to be plus 16% on your first investment going into tier 1. And in conjunction with the other adjustments made here alongside scaling down that bullet damage growth, I think this should stop some of the prevalence of Paige just absolutely running through teams with mass spam inside of fights. I was pretty happy to see these changes, of course, especially with the increases to gun damage inside of this patch. I was terrified that we were going to be living a Paige apocalypse for the next few weeks, but no, crisis averted. Paradox, another hero that I think a lot of people have been underappreciating or potentially undervaluing recently, scales incredibly easily. One of the best scaling characters in the game, honestly, in terms of some of the damage output you can get for very minimal investment here. Paradox has received a boatload of nerfs. So Valve going back in, painting her with a brush of trying to bring down some of that ridiculous output she could get away with. Health and regen's been scaled back on, using 50% base HP. You're going to be losing out a little bit of the regen as well, alongside scaling back on your HP increase per boon over the course of a game of Deadlock. And then its focus on Pulse Grenade. Pulse Grenade's going to have a lot of changes made to it here. Flat damage reduction by 5 with an increase on the spirit scaling, so making you invest more back into it rather than being able to just do big damage from the get-go, alongside fixing some of the bugs that allowed you to get away with some far more distance on an air dash than you were really intended to get when playing. I think it was like a weird bug that you could do with the right mouse button and kinetic carbines. Good to see that is gone and out the window. We can then focus up on Pocket as well. So Pocket, similar, you can see across the board here, a lot of that sort of self-sustain that's kind of been bloated recently in Deadlock has been targeted in this patch. They brought down some of the base barriers, brought down some of the actual hero barriers, and then brought down that base regen as well. They also increased their overall damage output from Cloak, but it is what it is. Let's look at a pretty cool change though. 7 has big balls. Lightning ball radius is up from 3.5 meters to 4.25. Feels like the biggest balls we've seen in quite some time. It was all power surge for a while, then it was all ult build. maybe it's back. Maybe ball build's back. I'd love to do some balling again. I think I'm going to have to lock 7 back in, start getting him back into my roster and play him a little bit more, as ball builds are absolutely when 7's at his best for me. I think that's when he's at his most fun. You're also not going to have to worry about having your gigantic head absolutely ruined with the crit scaling brought even further back. So he's got more reduction in crit damage that's going to be taken when people are shooting him in his gigantic head. For Shiv, it's some interesting nerfs again. You know, I've seen a lot of people in the movement community and the Shiv sort of community that are quite upset with the fact that this is back-to-back alt fire nerfs. In the previous balance patch, we had that reduction on alt fire's knockback. It's happened again here by 10% this time, alongside alt fire now increasing its ammo cost from 2 to 3. So it's getting pretty expensive. Killing blow was also nerfed, and they fixed a whole load of bugs with barriers and spirit damage scaling for him as well. So quite a few changes there that might actually make Shiv a bit more mortal, potentially at least a little bit less mobile as well. We can focus up on Sinclair, who I was very, very excited to see actually got some buffs, and in a cool way. Not just, oh, here's some more stats. This is fun. Spectral Assistant will now allow you to actually swap twice. Opens up so many doors, doesn't it? This is a huge increase, and it's basically like a wraith TP and then some now. You could throw one of these down, TP to it, TP back to yourself, and then in the place where you were, that's where the next spectral assistant's going to be left. So Savannah will be waiting for you right there. You can use this for some amazing juke plays. Can't wait to see what some of the pro players are going to be doing with this as well. You know, harassments that we saw back in the day from Piggy on Sinclair. This is basically going to be that next level, taken even further. Alongside that, you've got audience participation, getting some additional buffs to that as well there. So if you want to get some quick steals off onto an enemy's ultimate, you could probably use that in conjunction with the changes to your assistant as well. You're going to be getting away with absolute murder. Let's have a look what they've done to everyone's favorite goo boy, though. Viscous is up next on the docket. Now, a lot of targeted changes here in terms of splatter. So Valve identifying, you know, that kind of shotgunning frustration that's been done from splatter recently, where it's like first item investment, mystic shot, you're in lane versus a Viscous. Oh, bloody hell, all my HP is gone because I've been whacked in the face. They've tried to counteract this by increasing the cooldown up by quite a substantial amount. It's 9 seconds. So from 21 to 30, and then played around with what you're getting for both that tier 1, tier 2, and the tier 3 investment for AP there on splatter. Cubes also had some changes, and you can see popping out of the cube, it's actually Vyper, who's got a bit of a cheeky buff. Didn't expect this one, but of course they have just thrown a bit of a bone the way of Vyper, with the health per boon going up from 33 to 35, so slightly more sustain there being given to the lizard wizard. And then it'll be Warden. Now, Warden got some great buffs in this one in terms of his actual damage output when it comes to gun. That's going to be 16.2 to 16.6 on the bullet damage increase, alongside bullet damage growth going up from 0.44 to 0.48 as well. Did have his HP regen reduced from 3 to 2, similarly to, of course, a lot of heroes that have had that base reduction brought down slightly in the scaling inside of this update. And a shame for me, as I do enjoy my alchemical flask builds the most, but Alch Flask has been changed with the radius reduced from 6.5 meters to 5.5, forcing you to get that back on your tier 2, where it gives you plus 1 meter radius. So at base, not going to be as big, but it balances out, and it isn't really a nerf. It's just more of a change in terms of when you're getting that increased radius online for Warden. So again, swings and roundabouts, not the end of the world. You can still chase people down and absolutely wreck them with some Alch Flasks. Wraith, though, is up next on screen, TPing into this one. Again, as a Wraith main, a Wraith enjoyer, a certified gambler, I'm happy with this one. Wraith's got some great buffs here. Card Trick is back on the menu. It's been all full auto for so damn long, and I'm very happy. Anytime we get a card trick related patch where you can focus harder investment on those cards, it always feels so fun to play, and this is really good optics for me. Additionally, it's also going to be an unexpected buff over the Project Mind as well. well, so even an increase in terms of escape and mobility. Love to see that for all of the Wraith fans out there. Lastly then, in terms of hero changes, it's going to be Yamato. Yamato's had quite a few adjustments on this. Base regens down across the board. She follows the same trend, going down from 2.0 to 1.0. Power Slash has had some minor nerfs as well. Low charge damage is instead going to be 30% rather than 40% now, with medium charge damage going to 50% as well, down 10% from 60% pre-patch. Additionally, Crimson Slash cooldown goes up by just shy of 4 seconds here, so quite a long cooldown increase on Crimson Slash, with its tier 3 going to be increased to balance that out. Previously that was minus 5.75 seconds, now it's going to be minus 9 seconds, so that's how they've sort of balanced that one in terms of the AP investment. But that is it for all of your hero changes. Bloody hell, we got there. Quite a lot of adjustments, right? That's what I'm saying. It's a huge balance patch, but that's only the hero changes. Let's focus on the gameplay changes itself. On screen right now is a before and after comparison of just what Valve have done to the default camera's settings. Now, when this patch initially released, you were forced to use the brand new FOV, which personally I think is far better. Especially after playing a couple of games, you instantly get used to it. It feels like I have a reason to zoom in, a reason to use the full scope of my periphery vision as well. We're not scoped in, we're not using my right mouse button zoom, but I did see a lot of people that didn't enjoy it, saying that it made them feel sick, that it was a fisheye effect, and I can understand that. If you don't pump your field of view up very high in other games like I do, it might be a bit jarring. It's certainly something I can see being an issue. So it seemed like after Valve noticed this, they came back in with an adjustment. It was the first hotfix we got to this patch, where they added back legacy FOV. So now you can actually just toggle between both in-game. It's built into the game. You can either have the old camera settings that are visible on the left-hand side or the new camera settings that are on the right-hand side. Arguably, I will say, I think the right-hand side camera settings, the new ones, not the legacy settings, are just infinitely better in every way. But there is some unique instances of weird occurrences right now with it. Playing as Ava the cat, or in Viscous's goo ball, or even when you're Victor, if you're using his aura, it looks a bit weird. It's very zoomed out. You can see some of these instances as well when we look at sort of, kind of being backed up against a wall. It's more beneficial here. It's more beneficial in situations where the camera is going to be awkwardly blocked or you're looking to try and get a peek onto something, but it is a different system, so give it time, get used to it. Just go for whatever's your preference, really. For now though, let's dial back in on some of the gameplay and objective-based changes we've got inside of this balance update, as quite a few of them are pretty meta shifting. So Guardian's HP has been increased from 3,500 to 4,250. Walker HP is up by 40%. Now the fun change here is the fact that walkers are not made of paper. The side lanes are not weaker. This is meaning that side lane HP walkers now have the exact same HP as mid lane, rather than minus 37% less, which of course made them feel so easy to backdoor or just single push. If you played a bit of McGinnis, bit of Wraith, you could dive in, take their objectives for free. That shouldn't be happening as much anymore. You can also see some of the visible changes made to the map to telegraph the walker's stomp range, of course the fireball range, and your attack range a bit easier, just with some simple decals added to the floor and some candles that give it a nice little effect. Now they've also rebalanced the stomp timing, stomp damage, and how these walkers are going to be engaging when it comes to range attacks, stomp, stuff like that. You've got a bit more information on this now. It feels a bit more visceral, like the mechanic actually makes a lot more sense potentially for newer players as well. Walkers are going to be more of a challenge though, which should be good. I think this is a nice change. In terms of the games I played, I feel like it makes it a bit more interesting when you're going for these fights, and partly that is also because they've changed flex slots. You'll actually now start a game of Deadlock with 9 base slots available and only have to unlock 3 flex slots over the course of a game, 1 per each walker you kill. So far simpler system, right? It's no longer 3 guardians, 1 walker, etc, etc. It's now just going to be for every walker you take down, you get a flex slot. Should encourage players to push these walkers rather than not doing any objective damage. Shout out to you, every teammate in every game ever. Moving on, let's have a look at how much less claustrophobic mid is. Before is on screen right now. This is what it looked like. The tight corridors, the winding back doors, these awkward fights that you'd have when pushing up mid lane and having to fight around the blue walker. It felt like it was very claustrophobic, especially with the older field of view settings, right? Very tight angles. Now, how breathable is this? It's open, it's wide, it's gorgeous, nice map redesign here, using these decals I talked about previously as well to telegraph some of the attacks from the walker, giving you more visual feedback. Feels like Deadlock's really coming together inside of this patch, even if it doesn't contain, the most content crazy sort of like, oh, where's my big new heroes, where's all this? I really love the fact that it feels like this patch has dialed in on a lot of core issues of the game and made it feel so much better. In terms of replayability, breathability, opening up these areas, and honestly, I would say that this actually is a big patch for encouraging new players to get to grips with the game easier. Great changes there. Love to see the map adjustments that Valve have made on this one. They've made more adjustments as well. This is going to be down to when it comes to troopers, neutrals, jungling, etc., etc. So let's go through it a little bit. Neutral bounty souls are going to be up by 10% flat. Neutral HP, though, that goes up by 15%. It's also going to be increasing the damage output from these camps as well, alongside scaling their spirit resistance, things of this nature. So you've got small neutral camp damage going up by 15% with their respawn time down from 180 to 120. Medium camps have got better spirit resist now. That's going to be going up from 30% to 40%. Medium neutrals also deal 25% extra damage. Alongside that, the hard neutrals have higher spirit resist, 50% in fact, with them dealing even more damage, 30% damage back. That's great rebuttal from these camps. And then Sinner Sacrifice has had its return damage increased as well, up from 60 to 80. Effectively, this means that you're going to be getting greater rewards, but taking more damage and running greater risk when jungling, when going for these Sinner Sacrifices, when trying to steal neutral camps and take out the denizens, but you'll be getting far more souls back for it. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. I love to see that. You're also going to be dropping higher bounties when you go down, and you'll be slowed more by neutral camps as well. Longer recharge time on that. Valve also continue to play around with this idea of jump pad stuns, increasing the window from 0.6 to 0.9. So if you're caught on those bounce pads, being slapped down and tripping over is still certainly a possibility, to be aware of it. You don't want to find yourself in an awkward position. Mid-boss, of course, was also adjusted alongside Rejuvenator, as I mentioned back at the start of the video. So the Rejuv buff will no longer give you that increased HP, increased fire rate, and increased spirit damage amp. Instead, it's actually just going to be +2 permanent buffs that's given to each player that confirms it. Although the first player that punches Rejuv will still get that full heal. So make sure you're factoring that into whoever confirms the Rejuv. Moving on from that, mid-boss is also a bit tankier now. Similar changes made to Soul Earn delivery as well. If you drop that urn, it's now going to put your parry on cooldown, so you can't bait out instant hits from someone, but you will be getting +4 permanent golden buffs when dropping off the urn. This is a trade-off for the fact you won't be getting that +1 AP anymore when delivering it. Although Valve added 2 levels to the overall Soul levels at 47 and 49k, so you can still get all ability upgrades. Next up, let's talk about some of the movement changes. If you're unfamiliar, mantle sliding is what's happening on screen right now. If you mantle slide and get melee during that process, you will not be allowed to mantle slide afterwards. This is because it's going to apply that mantle slow. You can also see that if you get tagged by a neutral camp, it takes slightly longer to start sprinting at full velocity again now. So that's going to slow you down when it comes to jungling. If you want to make quick moves between lanes, if you get tagged, it will take longer to get your full sprint back. Wall jumping also costs stamina, even on the initial jump now. So every wall jump will use some stamina. So be wary of that when in movement escape scenarios. Lastly, Valve also toned down the stamina regen rate, making regenerating stamina take even longer, but that was reverted as of late last night, so don't worry, you can delete that one from your brain. If someone's telling you you've got to worry about stamina management a bit more, it's not an issue, they've rolled it back. Although we can now set our optics on, of course, the meat and potatoes of this meta shake-up update, that fine duality and balance between gun and spirit every few months. Let's have a look at how Valve has switched up the overall investment into these trees as well, and just what they've done in terms of the rewards. So at 4,800 souls in each category, you receive a massive upgrade now. It's going to be 20% weapon damage in gun, 12% bonus HP in vitality, and 20% spirit power in spirit. Alongside this, CDR, cooldown reduction, cooldown in general on most abilities in the game and items has been vastly reduced, with a lot of gun items being increased, although as of about 5 minutes ago, Valve said they fixed a weird bug that was causing gun scaling to be even higher than normal. So get back out there and see just how much damage you can do in this latest version of Deadlock. That's it though. Thanks for watching this ginormous episode of Patch Notice. I hope I've got you up to speed with all the latest and greatest changes in the game. Don't forget to subscribe here to Dead Air. Thanks for watching. As always, I've been your host, Jackie. Check us out over on Twitter at Jackie Esports. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.